We asked Cardinal Raymond Burke of the United States what Christians should consider while casting their ballots. What he told us is as follows. The Declaration of Independence articulated those essential principles, which we now have in America, to restore and reclaim. Wayne. The conflict between Pope Francis and Cardinal Raymond Burke simmered beneath the surface for years. Two influential people engaged in a covert conflict over the Catholic Church's soul. But now that Pope Francis is no longer in office, that hush has broken, and Burke has revealed something so shocking that even the most knowledgeable Vatican insiders are in disbelief. We're not referring about religious arguments or straightforward disagreements. Burke alluded to judgments done in secret, secrets held behind closed doors, and a version of church history that was never intended for the world to witness in his first public remarks since the Pope's death. His statements and inferences have sparked a flurry of conjecture. Did we underestimate what the church was concealing? How far does it go, if at all? This is only the beginning, so stay with us. Burke's early life and childhood. Pope Francis and Raymond Burke were frequently at odds. They disagreed on a wide range of subjects. Regarding the role of women in the church, LGBTQ rights, and other reforms the Pope favored, Burke disagreed with Francis. Their arguments grew more heated over time. Burke was even asked to vacate his Vatican apartment by Pope Francis. Pope Francis's death prompted Burke to finally speak out. Speak out. Many were taken aback by what he stated. Nobody anticipated that he would say these things. Many Catholics worldwide were stunned by what he said. On June 30, 1948, Houston Center, Wisconsin. He came from a Catholic Irish family and was the youngest of 6 children. Anne was the youngest of 6 children. Thomas and Marie Burke, his parents, were dairy farmers. The farm life was easy. A significant aspect of their everyday lives was religion. Raymond's father was diagnosed with brain cancer when he was in the 2nd grade. To bring communion to his father, a local priest frequently visited their home. Raymond kept a careful eye on the priest. Something strong struck him in the priest's performance of his responsibilities. He was inspired by this encounter. He made the decision early on that he wanted to be a priest. Raymond enrolled in Holy Cross Seminary in La Crosse, Wisconsin, in 1962 at the age of 14. For someone so young, this was a significant choice, but he took it seriously. Burke later relocated to the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. to pursue his studies. He graduated with a bachelor's and master's degree in philosophy from that institution. He then traveled to Rome to attend the Pontifical Gregorian University to study theology. He resided in the Pontifical North American College, which also housed a number of future cardinals and bishops. A few of his classmates went on to hold prominent positions inside the church. Pope Paul VI consecrated Burke as a priest at Sainte Thérèse Basilica in 1975. For him, this was a proud occasion. It was the beginning of his church career. Burke rejoined La Crosse after becoming ordained. He was employed at St. Joseph the Workman's Cathedral. At a local high school, he also taught religion. He was sent back to Rome by the church in 1980 to study canon law. He didn't like this subject at first. He was uncertain of his destiny and felt bewildered. But when an older priest saw that Burke was having trouble, he chose to assist him. Burke began to appreciate canon law as a result of this assistance. After putting in a lot of effort, he eventually obtained a doctorate in the field. Burke rose to prominence as one of the foremost authorities on canon law. He was assigned to more significant positions in the church after his return to the United States. Pope John Paul II assigned Burke a significant position in 1989. He became the first person from the United States to defend the bond at the Apostolic Signature. This position demonstrated that Burke was developing into a significant player in the church's judicial system and was no longer only a local priest. Burke's impact kept expanding. He was appointed bishop of the Diocese of La Crosse in 1995. He was then elevated to the position of Archbishop of St. Louis in 2004. Burke gained notoriety for his conservative and inflexible opinions in both capacities. He frequently celebrated Mass in Latin and advocated for traditional Catholic doctrines. Burke was unique among church leaders. He vigorously upheld the church's doctrines on Eucharist, marriage, and abortion. He felt that communion should not be given to politicians who advocated abortion. His stance was attacked by some conservative Catholics, but it was supported by many others. Pope Benedict I returned to Rome in 2008 for the 16th time. He appointed him prefect of the Apostolic Signator's Ultimate Tribunal. Burke had worked in the same court years before. He was then appointed a cardinal by Pope Benedict in 2010. Burke was by that time one of the Church's most influential speakers. When Pope Francis was elected in 2013, everything changed. His vision for the Church was distinct. Francis wished to make the Church more hospitable and transparent. When questioned about LGBT individuals, he answered things like, "Who am I to judge?" Additionally, he was in favor of the notion that faith and evolution could coexist. Burke disagreed with these opinions. He voiced his opposition to many of the Pope's measures, particularly those pertaining to communion regulations, divorce, and LGBTQ rights. According to him, the Church should never alter its beliefs, either abortion or male-to-female marriage. An open disagreement with Pope Francis. Burke was kicked out of the Congregation of Bishops, which assisted in choosing new bishops, by Pope Francis in December 2013. This demonstrated their increasing discord. The situation worsened in 2014 during a family-related Vatican summit. According to a report, there should be some significance placed on LGBT relationships by the Church. Burke was angry. According to him, the Church resembled a ship without a rudder. His remark garnered worldwide attention. Burke was soon dismissed from his legal position by Pope Francis. Rather, he bestowed upon him the symbolic position of Patron of the Order of Malta. Although Francis claimed it wasn't a punishment, many people didn't agree. Burke did not remain silent despite not holding a prominent position at the Vatican. He persisted in criticizing alterations inside the Church. He rose to prominence among conservative Catholics and was regarded as a leader of those who disagreed with Pope Francis's course. Burke did not, however, alter his opinions. He continued to criticize the Pope and once suggested that he could need to be formally corrected by the Church. Many Catholics were taken aback by that notion. With the death of Pope Francis, Burke is once again receiving attention. He is still active and speaks out at the age of 76. There are many who question whether he could become the first American pope. He continues to be one of the most well-known individuals in the Catholic Church and has significant support from conservatives. Burke had a significant setback in 2014. Pope Francis stripped him of most of his responsibilities after he attempted to remove a high-ranking official who had approved the use of condoms for Burmese citizens. All that remained of him was a ceremonial position. Then Francis sent someone else to the Order of Malta to take Burke's place. Burke was reportedly essentially suspended. Although it was never referred to as a punishment, it was obvious that he was no longer in control. Cardinal Burke claimed in 2015 that radical feminism was the true root of abuse in the Church. Since the 1960s, he thought it had harmed society and the Church. In 2019, he reiterated his thoughts. Burke, along with German Cardinal Walter Brandmüller, claimed that the gay agenda was the primary cause of the abuse issue. According to him, a large number of priests who participated in abuse were unsure of their own sexual orientation. There was a great deal of controversy and ire about these remarks. Burke, however, saw them as a reflection of his conviction that the Church was departing too much from its core principles. Burke took a risk in 2016. He and 3 other conservative cardinals publicly questioned Pope Francis. He wrote an official letter to the Pope. Adubia, which translates to doubts in Latin, was its name. They were reacting to Amoris Laetitia, or the Joy of Love, a document authored by Pope Francis. According to a letter sent by the Pope, the Church ought to be more understanding of those who feel abandoned, particularly divorced individuals who have remarried. Those who remarried without an annulment were prohibited from receiving communion per church regulations. They were thought to be sinners. However, Pope Francis stated that in private discussions, priests may assist each individual in determining what was best for them. Burke disagreed with the other cardinals. They claimed that this led to misunderstandings and ambiguity in church regulations. The Pope was asked to clarify his stance. A pope would typically reply with a formal response, but Pope Francis remained silent. Burke did not remain silent. He cautioned that a formal correction might be required if the pope did not respond. Burke took it a step further in 2018. According to him, there are instances when defying the pope is essential. Burke felt it was his job, but many Catholics were startled that a cardinal would speak out so vehemently against the pope. More disputes over what the church teaches. Another dispute occurred in 2019. The gathering of bishops from the Amazon region was the topic of discussion this time. Burke and Athanasius Schneider, another conservative bishop, wrote a lengthy statement against it. They said that several of the meeting's concepts contradicted what the church actually taught. The church's openness to regional Amazonian practices particularly irritated them. Burke believed this allowed non-Christian views too much room. He also opposed granting women additional roles in church rituals and allowing married men to serve as priests. Not even the idea of girls acting as altar servers pleased him. Burke claimed that when girls are included, boys get disinterested. He thought that the church was becoming overly preoccupied with women. According to him, men now feel insignificant in both society and the church as a result of radical feminism. Burke was likewise adamantly against same-sex unions. Politicians who support it should never be elected by Catholics, he said. He asserted that Satan is the source of these concepts. He referred to same-sex marriage as a perilous myth that will harm individuals, families, and the nation. Burke's rigid thinking became a big part of who he was. Burke made every effort to thwart Pope Francis' attempts to modernize the church. Burke became into one of the biggest opponents of vaccines when the COVID-19 pandemic started. He particularly disapproved of vaccinations made with stem cells. People shouldn't trust them, he said. He didn't stop there, though. Burke also propagated conspiracy theories and misleading facts. He said that vaccines may be used to manipulate people. He even asserted that they might have microchips and be a component of a government tracking scheme. He connected these concepts to a philosophy of worldwide domination known as the Great Reset. Burke persisted in believing his assertions despite the fact that other experts disagreed. Oddly, he later became seriously ill with COVID-19. He was on the verge of death and required a week of ventilation. Nevertheless, he lived and resumed public speaking. Burke was a vocal opponent of abortion as well. Burke believed the Pope was not doing enough, even though he and Pope Francis oppose it. He urged Catholic politicians who support abortion rights, such as President Joe Biden and John Kerry, to no longer receive communion from American bishops. He claimed that allowing them to partake in communion erodes other people's faith. Burke also supported the Tridentine liturgy, an ancient Latin liturgy. Since the 1500s, this version has been in use. It adheres to stringent guidelines and is spoken in Latin. Pope Francis, however, made it more difficult for churches to employ this older form in 2021. According to him, it had come to represent those who were resistant to reform inside the church. Burke didn't agree. He claimed that the new regulations were severe and unforgiving. He even questioned if these adjustments could be made by the Pope. Burke's penchant for tradition gained attention once more when he donned a gallarero, an antique cardinal cap. Burke clarified that it was merely a gift and that he only wore it once for a picture after a picture of him wearing it went viral, and some people believed he was attempting to revive old traditions. Even with all these arguments, both men have stated that they do not consider each other to be enemies. In 2017, Pope Francis stated unequivocally, "I do not see Cardinal Burke as an enemy." He told the media, "I don't even know where it is now. I've never worn it to a ceremony." Pope Francis takes away Burke's privileges in late 2023. Pope Francis took Cardinal Burke seriously and took away two significant benefits that Burke had enjoyed for years: his free apartment in Rome and his euros 5,000 monthly Vatican salary. These were not insignificant benefits. Burke had lived in a spacious apartment without paying rent and was paid regularly, despite his frequent criticism of the Pope. Why now? After Burke's most recent public outcry in October 2023, Burke voiced his displeasure with two recent actions taken by the Pope: allowing divorced Catholics to partake in communion and allowing priests to bless same-sex couples. This time, Pope Francis responded with a letter, stating that priests could bless same-sex couples, but only in a way that made it clear their relationships were not the same as traditional marriage between a man and a woman. Burke disagreed with both and publicly stated, so. This marked a significant shift in the church. It demonstrated that the Pope was attempting to be more hospitable while maintaining certain rules, which Burke felt was excessive. Shortly after, on November 20, Pope Francis met with Vatican leaders, and they determined that Burke had gone too far, accusing him of using the church's backing to oppose the church's leadership. They took away his salary and apartment as a result, but Burke stated that he would not leave Rome, telling reporters that he would cover his own housing costs if necessary, and that "I've never felt that the Pope sees me as an enemy." Nevertheless, the situation demonstrated that the boundary between simple disagreement and disloyalty had been crossed. Subsequently, rumors exacerbated the situation. Following the announcement of the Pope's decision, a traditional Catholic news organization reported that Pope Francis had stated, "Cardinal Burke is my enemy, so I am taking away his apartment and salary." This statement infuriated many, portraying the Pope as unjust and personal. The quote in the news article about Cardinal Burke was utterly untrue, according to Pope Francis, who told writer Austin Ivory that during the November 20th meeting, he merely told Vatican officials that Burke would lose his apartment and salary. This confirmed what some traditionalist groups already thought, which was that he is too harsh on those who disagree with him. The quote that was circulated in the news was a fabrication, probably leaked by someone who wanted to tarnish the Pope's reputation. Unfortunately, by the time the truth was revealed, the fabricated quote had already gone viral on the internet. Several witnesses to the Vatican meeting attested to the fact that the Pope never used the word enemy. None of these officials claimed that the Pope took it personally, but they all agreed that his decision was motivated by concern for the Church's unity, with one official telling the Associated Press that Burke was losing his privileges because he was causing disunity in the Church, and another telling Reuters that Burke was working against the Church's leadership. In an interview with the New York Times, Cardinal Burke acknowledged that the Pope no longer wanted him to have any leadership positions, but he did not apologize, demonstrating once more that Pope Francis was acting not out of anger, but rather out of what he believed was necessary to protect the Church. "It's obvious that the Pope does not want me in any leadership role," he stated. He denied becoming anyone's adversary, though. Burke claimed he felt compelled to speak out because he felt it was his responsibility, and because he considered that some of the Pope's policies were detrimental to the Church. Burke claimed to be following his conscience, but his public remarks frequently caused division. For many years, Burke saw himself as someone who was defending Catholic tradition, strongly disagreed with the changes made by Pope Francis, and believed that change should never come at the expense of fundamental church beliefs. As a result, he said, "I had to speak up because it was my duty." That division became too serious for many churchgoers to overlook. Burke also attempted to distance himself from political figures, including former U.S. President Donald Trump advisor Steve Bannon, who had previously served on the board of Bannon's organization, the Dignitas Humani Institute, but resigned in 2019 because Bannon wanted to make a film based on the contentious book In the Closet of the Vatican, which Burke opposed. Burke, who had frequently criticized the Pope's leadership, said he had only met Bannon 3 or 4 times and only to discuss church-related issues, and he wanted people to know that he had no affiliation with any political campaigns. For years, people inside and outside the Catholic Church wondered when Pope Francis would finally take action. Austin Ivory, a writer, was the best person to explain why Pope Francis allowed him to stay a cardinal, despite the fact that he had written letters, criticized church events, and even hinted at formally challenging the Pope's authority. He didn't take away his home or his salary until now. They questioned what took him so long. Instead, Ivory claims that Pope Francis is a patient man. He gives people a lot of chances, but there is a limit. After more than a decade of observing Burke's behavior, the Pope finally concluded that he had gone too far. gone too far. Cardinal Burke had frequently made public statements, written articles, and given interviews that contradicted the Pope's message. Some claimed he was establishing an alternative voice that challenged Pope Francis and a sort of second leadership in the church. At the same time, Burke was living in an apartment owned by the Vatican, and church funds were being used to pay for his expenses. This seemed unfair to many people who saw a wealthy cardinal publicly opposing the Pope, whom he had vowed to follow and respect, while using church support. And respect white. One person who keeps up with church news said Burke was wrong to do this. Nevertheless, Burke gained popularity among conservative Catholics, who viewed him as the only authentic voice upholding traditional church doctrine. Despite this, Pope Francis did not punish Burke out of rage, but rather made his decision in private and without making a public announcement, which the public only learned about later, probably due to a media leak. The leak may have been intended to damage the Pope's reputation, but the Pope stated that his decision was about maintaining peace and unity within the Church, not retaliation. The situation appears to have reached its zenith, now that Cardinal Burke has been formally stripped of his privileges. Following Pope Francis's death on Easter Monday at the age of 88, focus has shifted to the Church's future. While the Catholic Church observes a period of mourning when a pope passes away, a crucial procedure known as a conclave, during which cardinals from all over the world travel to Rome to select the next pope, begins behind the scenes. The 138 cardinals who are currently eligible to vote will remain inside the Vatican for 2 or 3 weeks, meeting privately in the Sistine Chapel, where they will vote repeatedly until one of them receives at least 2/3 of the votes and agrees to become the next pope. Only cardinals under the age of 80 are eligible to vote or be chosen. Following Pope Francis's death, the Church must select a new leader, and Cardinal Raymond Burke is one name that is receiving a lot of attention. This is the same process that brought Pope Francis into power in 2013, when Pope Benedict XVI resigned due to health issues, marking the first time a pope had resigned in 600 years. Cardinal Burke is not the only candidate being considered for the position of pope. There are a number of other candidates from various parts of the Church, some of whom are more traditional in their thinking, while others are more modern. One potential candidate is Cardinal Prulin, who has served as the Vatican's Secretary of State and is renowned for his balance. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle of the Philippines is another excellent choice. He is regarded as compassionate and supportive of the reforms made by Pope Francis. Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, who is known for helping people and adhering to ideas that align with Pope Francis's approach. And Cardinal Peter Erdo of Hungary, who is more conservative. He shares many of Burke's opinions, but he is not as vocal. Burke is currently 6th among the leading contenders, and his political backing is what sets him apart. If Cardinal Burke is elected pope, the Church may return to a more traditional and strict path, but if someone like Cardinal Tagle or Cardinal Parolin takes the helm, the Church may continue the more open and modern path that Pope Francis began. In any case, the world will be watching as the choice shapes the Catholic Church's future for years to come.